Have you ever noticed how people seem uncomfortable around someone who's clearly more intelligent than them? You walk into a room, share an insight that cuts through the surface chatter, and suddenly the energy shifts. Eyes avoid yours. Conversations become forced. The atmosphere grows cold. What if the very intelligence you've worked to develop, the sharp mind you're proud of, is the exact reason why others pull away from you? Arthur Schopenhauer, the brilliant German philosopher, discovered a disturbing truth about human nature. We don't celebrate intelligence. We fear it, we resent it, and we punish those who possess it. Most people believe that being smart will make them popular, respected, maybe even loved. Schopenhauer called this belief the mark of a greenhorn, someone completely naive about how the world actually works. The reality cuts deeper than social awkwardness or professional jealousy. When you display genuine intelligence, you become a mirror that reflects back everyone else's limitations. You expose their intellectual inadequacies without even trying. And that mirror creates something far more dangerous than dislike. It breeds hatred. Schopenhauer spent his life studying this phenomenon, drawing from his masterwork, The World as Will and Representation, and his practical guide, Counsels and Maxims. His insights reveal why exceptional minds often find themselves isolated, misunderstood, and attacked by the very society they could help elevate. This exploration will uncover 3 core truths about intelligence and society: why your mind intimidates others, how genius operates differently from ordinary thinking, and what happens when brilliance collides with mediocrity. By the end, you'll understand not just why you feel alone in your intelligence, but how to navigate a world that fears what you represent. Schopenhauer warned that a man must be still a greenhorn in the ways of the world if he imagines that he can make himself popular in society by exhibiting intelligence and discernment. I wouldn't say this is considered lacking social skills or being arrogant. Instead, this is about a fundamental flaw in how most people respond to intellectual superiority. When you engage someone intellectually, their mind unconsciously performs a devastating calculation. They recognize that you're very much their superior. Then a painful conclusion is formed. This superior person must think poorly of them. Schopenhauer called this mental process an enthymeme, a logical conclusion that produces sullen and rancorous hatred. The cruelest part? People suppress the real reason for their anger, even from themselves. They can't admit they hate you because you're smarter. Instead, they find other reasons to justify their resentment. You're arrogant. You're condescending. You think you're better than everyone. But here's what's really happening. Your intelligence threatens their vanity. Schopenhauer understood that intellectual ability gives someone their commanding place in life. When you expose superiority in this most precious domain, you commit an offense that feels almost violent to their self-image. Think about the last time you shared a complex idea and watched someone's face change. That shift wasn't confusion, it was recognition of their own inadequacy, and that recognition transformed into something much darker. Even adopting humility can't erase this offense. As Schopenhauer noted, quoting the Persian poet Sa'di, "Foolish people are 100-fold more averse to meeting the wise than the wise to the foolish." Your very presence reminds them of what they lack. The bitter irony: stupidity attracts people. Just as physical warmth pleases the body, intellectual superiority pleases the mind when you're the one feeling superior. People gravitate toward company that makes them feel smarter, more capable, more valuable by comparison. To be liked, Schopenhauer concluded, you must appear inferior in point of intellect. Now we must examine how this dynamic creates an even deeper divide, one that separates exceptional minds from ordinary consciousness entirely. Schopenhauer revealed that genius operates through what he called a double intellect. Most people possess one intellect that serves their personal will, their desires, fears, and immediate needs. But genius possesses a second intellect that detaches completely from personal concerns to mirror the world objectively. This isn't just about being smart. Schopenhauer described genius as the capacity for pure contemplation, the ability to set aside your will and perceive reality without the distortion of personal interest. While ordinary people can do this momentarily when appreciating art, genius sustains this objective vision continuously. However, this gift comes with a terrible price. The genius lives what Schopenhauer called a second life, purely of the intellect. Like a parasite in the brain, this higher consciousness operates apart from normal human concerns. The genius becomes absorbed in knowledge and insight while remaining incompetent in practical affairs. Schopenhauer compared the difference between ordinary minds and genius to musical tones. Regular intellects produce open chest notes, straightforward, predictable sounds. Genius resembles harmonics produced by dividing air columns, more complex, beautiful, but also more fragile and difficult to sustain. This creates profound isolation. The genius finds himself living in a world with which he has nothing in common. His intellectual superiority makes contemporaries appear small, wretched, and insipid. Dialogue with ordinary people becomes like a child talking to a doll, one-sided, frustrating, ultimately meaningless. The scale of intelligence, according to Schopenhauer, is determined by how far thought moves from the merely individual toward the universal. Animals perceive only individuals, whereas humans use reason to generalize. The higher the intellect, the nearer it approaches universal insight, but the further it moves from human connection. What makes this even more tragic is that genius often correlates with irrationality and eccentricity. Because the genius operates through perception rather than abstract reasoning, they appear impulsive, extreme, even mad to others. Strong impressions from their heightened perception overpower conventional logic, creating what Schopenhauer called the kinship between genius and madness. The genius possesses a clarity of consciousness that others cannot comprehend, leading us to perhaps the most painful aspect of exceptional intelligence. Schopenhauer made a devastating observation. Intellect is invisible to the man who has none. This isn't merely about education or training, it's about the fundamental inability of lower intelligence to perceive higher intelligence operating. When genius presents the world in a mirror with greater clarity than others can achieve, most people simply cannot see what's being reflected. They lack the cognitive architecture to process insights that transcend their intellectual capacity. The gulf between genius and ordinary minds is not just one of degree, but of kind. This creates a cruel paradox. The genius offers society its deepest insights, its most valuable perspectives, its potential salvation from ignorance and suffering. Yet society responds with incomprehension, suspicion, and often violence. Schopenhauer noted that scholars treat genius like a hare, good to eat after it has been killed and dressed, but alive it is only good to shoot at. Recognition, when it comes, arrives only after the genius is safely dead. Then society can celebrate their contributions without feeling threatened by their living presence. The genius becomes a higher being, whose message feels like a revelation, but only when they can no longer challenge anyone's intellectual comfort. Quite the unfortunate reality. This explains why genius must work for coming generations rather than contemporaries. Like an exile erecting a monument on a lonely island, the genius may remain unknown in their lifetime. Their compensation lies not in external honors, but in self-possession and delight in their own thought. The social dynamics become even more complex because ordinary minds think alike. Their judgments converge on fundamental views, regardless of truth, creating what we might call the tyranny of consensus. Great minds often oppose or resist these popular beliefs, making them appear not just different, but dangerous to social cohesion. Schopenhauer understood that modesty in genius is impossible. True creative works requires indifference, or even contempt toward public opinion. The genius cannot pretend to be less than they are without betraying their essential nature. Yet this authenticity guarantees social rejection. The motive of genius isn't wealth, glory, or pleasure, but an instinct to give permanent form to vision. Like a tree bearing fruit it will never taste. This instinct serves the will to live of the species, preserving moments of rare insight for posterity. The genius lives a life of industrious solitude, caring little for contemporaries while aiming at humanity's future. But how can those of us who recognize this dynamic in our own lives learn to navigate it practically? Understanding why society fears intelligence doesn't solve the problem, but it does change how you approach it. Here are 3 strategies Schopenhauer's insights suggest for protecting your intellectual gifts while surviving in a world that resents them. First, practice strategic intellectual solitude. Assess whether your current environment appreciates or penalizes intellectual depth. Most workplaces, social groups, and even families operate on mediocrity as the acceptable standard. Create regular sanctuary spaces where you can engage in unfiltered intellectual exploration without judgment. Choose carefully when and with whom to share your deeper insights, focusing on quality over quantity rather than trying to educate everyone around you. Second, learn to recognize intellectual intimidation patterns. Notice when people become defensive, dismissive, or hostile during intellectual conversations. Track which topics or depths of discussion trigger negative responses in different groups. I'm not saying you need to dumb yourself down. Instead, it's about understanding the battlefield so you can pick your battles wisely. Calibrate your intellectual expression based on your audience's capacity and receptivity, not their demands. Third, transform resentment into compassion. When you encounter hostility toward your intelligence, remember that it stems from others' feelings of inadequacy, not malice. Your intellectual gifts are largely unearned, a combination of genetics, circumstances, and choices you didn't fully control. Practice empathy for those who suffer at all levels of intelligence. Channel your abilities to contribute constructively rather than to dominate or diminish others. The goal isn't to hide your light under a bushel, but to shine it wisely. Some conversations deserve your full intellectual engagement. Others require restraint. Learning the difference protects both your mental energy and your relationships with those who might benefit from your insights over time. Remember, Your intelligence is both a gift and a burden. Society's fear of it reflects their limitation, not your failure. Schopenhauer's insights reveal a truth most intelligent people discover painfully. The very qualities that could elevate humanity are often the ones that isolate you from it. Your sharp mind, your ability to see through surface appearances, your hunger for deeper understanding, these aren't social advantages. They're markers that set you apart from the crowd that fears what it cannot comprehend. The genius lives for posterity, not popularity. Your insights, your contributions, your moments of clarity might not be appreciated by those around you today, but they become part of humanity's gradual awakening to deeper truths. Every generation builds on the courage of those who dared to think beyond the accepted boundaries of their time. Perhaps the loneliness of intelligence isn't a bug, it's a feature. It forces you to develop the inner strength necessary to preserve and transmit insights that lesser minds would dilute or destroy. Your solitude becomes a sanctuary where truth can flourish without compromise. The question isn't whether society will ever stop fearing intelligence. The question is whether you'll have the courage to honor your gifts despite that fear. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the lonely heights of intellectual life. If this resonated, please share your reflections in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the depths of practical psychology, philosophy, and personal development. Until next time.